As Isla fights for survival, a mysterious wolf king offers her a destiny she never imagined. Will she accept her true power, or be crushed by the curse that binds their worlds? The rain fell in torrents, its cold fingers scraping at Isla's skin, as if the heavens themselves were punishing her for trying to escape. Each droplet hit the pavement with a sharp crack, a constant reminder that she was running out of time. The alley she had stumbled into was narrow, its walls closing in on her as the storm blurred everything into a hazy, swirling mess of shadows and noise. Isla's breath came in desperate, shaky gasps. Her legs, already worn thin by the days of running, had finally given way. Blood seeped through the tear in her side, staining the once white fabric of her dress. Her hand gripped the hem tightly, trying to keep the wound from opening further, but it was futile. The pain was unbearable. And behind her, his footsteps grew closer. Derek, her tormentor, hadn't let her go. He would never let her go. Her daughter's soft sobs pierced the storm's roar. "Mommy, I'm scared," Leia whispered, her tiny hand clutching Isla's as she tried to keep up. Isla's heart ached as she stumbled forward, her body weakening, dragging her daughter with her. She wanted to scream, to beg for help, but her voice was swallowed by the storm, drowned out by the weight of her fear. "Please, don't hurt me. I can't walk." The words barely made it past her lips, and the world around her seemed to mock her helplessness. She looked over her shoulder, her eyes wide with panic as Derek's cruel laughter echoed in the distance. His voice was getting closer, filled with venom. "You think you can run from me, Isla? No one escapes me, not even you." The alley stretched ahead, but it felt like it would never end. The walls seemed to press closer, the path narrowing with every step she took. Her body was shaking, her legs barely holding her upright. Her eyes flicked down to Leia, still clutching her teddy bear, the only source of comfort left in this nightmare. And then, silence. A deep, unnatural quiet spread over the alley. The rain seemed to slow, as though the world itself had paused. Isla froze, her heart pounding. The footsteps stopped. Her breath hitched as a shadow moved toward her from the darkness, a figure that did not belong in this world. It was too tall, too composed, too other. In the brief flash of lightning, the figure was illuminated, standing at the alley's mouth like a guardian. His eyes burned a deep, molten gold beneath the hood of his cloak, eyes that pulsed with an ancient power. Isla's heart skipped a beat. "No, I'm here, my queen." His voice was low, almost reverent, filled with a power that made the air itself tremble. He stepped forward, his figure emerging from the storm like an ethereal force. His hand reached out to her, not to harm, but to shield her from the storm and the man who had haunted her every step. Isla's pulse raced, confusion clouding her mind. This was no ordinary man. This was something else, something far older and more powerful. His presence alone seemed to make the storm hesitate, each raindrop freezing midair. She clutched Leia tighter, but her body was too weak to move. "I don't understand," Isla whispered, her voice shaking as she stared up at the towering figure. "Who are you?" The man's gaze softened, his face an unreadable mask, and yet there was something about him, something that stirred memories she couldn't place, something deep within her that recognized him. "I'm here to protect you, my queen." In the silence that followed his words, time seemed to stretch. Isla's heart raced, and a deep, unsettling feeling settled in her chest. The world had shifted around her, and for the first time, she wondered if she had stepped into a destiny far greater than anything she had imagined. She wasn't just running from her past anymore, she was running from a future she couldn't understand. And so, as the rain continued to fall, each drop now like a quiet memory, Isla braced herself for what came next. Because in that moment, she realized, the nightmare was just beginning. Before we continue, hit subscribe and drop a comment, letting us know what city you're watching from. Isla's eyes fluttered open, but the world around her was blurred, disjointed and foreign. Her body felt heavy, weighed down by a fatigue she couldn't place. A soft, rhythmic sound pulsed in the background, like the beating of a heart, slow and steady. But it didn't belong to her. Her pulse thudded weakly in her ears, a constant reminder of the pain in her side. The scent of unfamiliar herbs, clean linen, and something ancient filled the air. As her vision cleared, she found herself lying on a bed. No, a couch, softer than any she had ever felt in her life. Her dress had been replaced with a simple tunic, and her wounds had been bandaged with care. The weight on her chest lifted as she tried to sit up, but a sharp pain sliced through her side. She winced and gasped, clutching the bandages that now covered her arm and torso. Where am I? The question echoed in her mind. She couldn't remember how she had gotten here or what had happened after Rylan had lifted her into his arms. A shadow shifted across the room, and Isla stiffened, panic gripping her chest. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the tall figure standing by the window, a figure that was both familiar and utterly alien. Rylan. His presence seemed to stretch the room, filling it with something primal, something that should have terrified her, but it didn't. Not completely. His amber eyes met hers, burning with intensity. The golden glow in them seemed to pull at her, like a force she couldn't resist. For a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. "You're awake," he said, his voice low. Gentle, a sharp contrast to the power that rippled beneath it. "I was beginning to worry." "Where am I?" Isla croaked, her throat dry, her voice cracked from the strain of the night's ordeal. "You're safe," he replied, his tone soft but reassuring. "In my manor." She tried to sit up again, but the pain from her side intensified, and she gasped, her hand clutching the bed as if it were the only thing holding her together. Rylan's eyes darkened in concern. "You shouldn't move yet. You're still healing." Why did you help me?" Isla whispered, struggling to process the confusion and terror swirling in her chest. "Why me?" His gaze softened, and he moved closer, kneeling at her side. "You don't remember yet, do you?" Her breath caught at the intensity of his words. She had no idea what he meant, but a strange pull in her chest made her want to know. She couldn't explain it, but there was something familiar about the way he looked at her, as if they had shared an eternity together. "I don't understand," she muttered, staring into his eyes, which now seemed to shimmer with ancient sorrow. "I can't. This all feels like a dream, a nightmare." Rylan's lips quirked, though his expression remained solemn. "It's not a dream, Isla. You've been chosen." "Chosen?" Her breath quickened as she recoiled slightly, her mind racing with the implications. "Chosen for what?" He gazed at her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. "You are the one who is destined to break the curse. You are not just any mortal woman, Isla. You are my queen." His words struck like thunder. Queen. Her mind struggled to wrap around the notion. She had barely survived her husband's cruelty, and now she was being told she was some kind of royalty. A queen. The idea felt absurd. Her life had been nothing more than a fight for survival. What does he mean by this? "I don't understand." Her voice was barely a whisper as confusion clouded her thoughts. "A queen. But I'm just me." Rylan's gaze softened, his hand gently brushing the hair from her face. His touch was cold, like the night itself, but strangely comforting. "You are more than you realize, Isla. You have always been more." She stared at him, trying to make sense of his words, but they seemed to twist and shift, eluding her understanding. She could feel the pressure building inside her chest, a deep, instinctual need to understand what he was saying, to know what he meant. Rylan stood, pacing across the room before turning back to her. His form seemed to glow with an ethereal energy, almost as though the very air around him bent in reverence. "You are the reincarnation of my long-lost queen," he said, his voice heavy with something ancient, something that spoke of lifetimes. "She died centuries ago, and with her death, A curse was placed upon this world. A curse that has bound the human and wolf realms in darkness. That curse cannot be broken unless you, Isla, fulfill your destiny. Isla's mind raced to catch up with the magnitude of his words. What? What? His eyes grew distant, haunted, as if he were looking at something far beyond the room. You were once my queen. You were a ruler of great power and compassion, and when you died, everything changed. My people, my wolves, we have been lost ever since. But now, you have returned to break the curse and restore balance. Isla's pulse raced as the weight of his words pressed down on her. She felt the air in the room grow heavy, and a strange sensation crept over her, as though she had lived this before, this conversation, this moment, all of it. No, this can't be real. She shook her head in disbelief, gripping the blankets beneath her. I don't even remember my own name sometimes. How can I be someone's queen? Ryland's gaze softened with sorrow. I know this is hard to believe. I understand your doubt. You're still waking up to the truth, but the memories will come, Isla. In time, you will remember who you truly are. Isla's chest tightened. I don't want to remember. Her voice trembled. I've lost so much already. Then you'll remember for a different reason, Ryland murmured. Because your pain has shaped you into the queen you need to be. A queen who will unite the human and wolf realms. Her heart felt heavy, a weight of something she couldn't grasp. This queen she was meant to be. Was that really her? Why me? She whispered, her voice catching in her throat. Why not someone else? Why me? Ryland lowered his gaze, his eyes shadowed with something more profound than sorrow. Because your heart has always been connected to mine. I have waited centuries to find you again, and now, here you are. Isla swallowed, the weight of his words sinking deep into her chest. Her mind was still reeling, struggling to process the truth he was offering. She had always known there was something more to her life than the abuse and the pain. But this was something beyond her understanding. Something far greater than she could ever have imagined. I'm not ready, she said, her voice breaking. I'm just trying to survive. Ryland knelt by her side, his hand gently taking hers. His touch was firm, steady, like the grounding force of the earth itself. You don't have to be ready, Isla. You've already survived. That's what matters. His words sank into her, and for a moment the chaos of her thoughts stilled. The storm outside raged on, but inside the room, everything felt still. It was as if, in that moment, the world outside ceased to exist, and only the two of them remained. And then, just as the silence between them thickened, a memory flared up, a fleeting image of a past life. A woman standing tall, a crown on her head, her eyes burning with determination and power. Isla couldn't place it, but the image felt so familiar, so real. She looked up at Ryland, his face drawn with centuries of grief and longing. He didn't speak, but his eyes held something deep, something that spoke of a history she couldn't yet grasp. You are my queen, Isla, he said softly, and you will remember. In time, you will remember everything. And as his words lingered in the air, Isla felt a strange certainty rise within her. The world had shifted, and she was no longer just a woman running from her past. She was something more, something ancient, something fated. Her story was far from over. It had only just begun. Isla's confusion has shifted toward understanding, but she is still trapped between disbelief and the pull of her forgotten destiny. Ryland's revelations about her past life and the prophecy that ties her to him raise more questions than answers, and the weight of her responsibilities is beginning to settle on her shoulders. Yet, even as she grapples with these truths, she can't deny the deep, undeniable connection she feels to Ryland, and the forces now at play that are guiding her path. The nights in the manor were always cold, but tonight the chill felt deeper. Isla stood at the wide windowsill of her chamber, staring out into the endless expanse of the dark forest. The wind howled through the trees, making the branches sway and creak, as if the land itself were groaning in protest. But even the storm outside could not mask the unease that simmered within her. The air felt too still, as if it were holding its breath. "It's him again," she thought, a cold shiver running down her spine. Isla had felt it the moment she woke, Derek's presence. It was a sharp, invasive energy that tore through her senses, like the crackling of a fire that couldn't be extinguished. No matter how far she ran, she could feel him, hunting her, calling her back into his twisted grip. She clenched her hands against the cold stone, her fingertips brushing the jagged edges of the window frame. Her breath fogged the glass as she exhaled sharply. She was here, safe for now, but he was still out there, still searching. A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. She turned, her heart beating faster, the pulse in her neck throbbing with the fear she couldn't shake. Rylan entered the room, his presence like a sudden shift in the air, his eyes, always burning with that strange golden light, softened when they met hers. "Are you well?" His voice was steady, concerned, but there was something else beneath it. A tension. He knew just as she did that peace was temporary. "I can feel him," Isla said, her voice low, betraying the unease she was fighting to suppress. "Derek, he's out there." Rylan nodded, stepping closer to her. His hand hovered just above her shoulder before he lowered it, as if restraining himself from pulling her into his arms. His presence was calming, but it didn't ease the growing pressure in her chest. She could still feel him, the weight of his magic, reaching into the farthest corners of her mind, like an invasive shadow creeping in from the darkness. "Derek's dark magic is powerful," Rylan said quietly, his gaze fixed on the storm outside. "He will not rest until he has you back under his control. He cannot allow you to fulfill your role as queen." Isla turned toward him, her eyes narrowing. "Why? What is it about me? Why does he want me so badly?" Rylan's eyes darkened, and for the first time since they had met, a flicker of anger passed through his features, but it was not directed at her. It was something deeper, something old. Derek's magic is not his own. He made a pact with the ancient forces of darkness, forces that now haunt this land. The curse that binds our realms together, the one that has kept us in suffering for centuries, was his doing. He is the one who caused it, and he will do whatever it takes to keep you from breaking it. Isla's breath caught in her throat. The curse. She had heard the word before, but now, with Rylan's words, it felt so much heavier, as if the weight of it was finally bearing down on her. She turned away from him, her thoughts spinning. She had been trying to piece together the fragments of her past, the visions, the strange memories that flickered like shadows in her mind. But nothing made sense. Why me? Why am I the one to break the curse? The curse, Rylan continued, his voice gentle but laced with centuries of pain, was meant to bind us forever. The wolf kingdom, the human realm, both cursed to remain at war, suffering under the darkness that Derek brought forth. You were meant to be the key to breaking it, Isla. But when you died in your past life, everything shattered. And Derek's magic, his pact with the darkness, grew stronger. It twisted everything, but the curse, it can be undone if you embrace your role as queen. Isla swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the window again. She didn't want this. She didn't want to be anyone's queen. She didn't even know how to be a woman who survived, let alone lead a kingdom. But she could feel it, the weight of Rylan's words, the pull of something greater, something ancient stirring within her. You have to embrace your destiny, Isla, Rylan said softly, sensing her inner turmoil. Only then can the curse be lifted. Only then can you free both realms. She closed her eyes, fighting the wave of confusion that crashed over her. How could I possibly? But her thoughts were interrupted by the sharp twinge of pain in her side, where the wound from the night before had reopened, fresh blood seeping through the bandages. Her hand instinctively went to the wound, but before she could press against it, Rylan was at her side, his touch gentle as he placed his hand over hers. His warmth seeped into her, calming the pain, grounding her. He was like a steady flame, both comforting and terrifying, but undeniably real. "You're stronger than you realize," Rylan said softly, his voice a low murmur in the dim light of the room. "You will learn to control your powers. You will become the queen you were meant to be. Together, we will break the curse, but Derek will not give up. He will try to use his magic against you again." Isla nodded, her chest tightening as the reality of her situation set in. She was not just running from Derek anymore. She was running toward something much greater, something that could shatter the very fabric of the world she knew. And the responsibility, it was suffocating. But as her eyes met Rylan's, there was something else, something deep, unspoken, something that made her heart beat faster. She was not alone. "I'm here," Rylan said quietly, his gaze unwavering. "I will protect you, no matter what it takes." Before she could respond, a sudden rush of wind cut through the room, the faintest whisper of a voice riding on the gust. Isla froze. Derek's magic. "It's here." Rylan's eyes hardened, and without a word, he moved to the door. "Stay here," he commanded softly, though there was an edge to his voice that made her heart flutter with fear. "Lock the door behind me. Whatever happens, you must remain inside. Do not move unless I say so." Isla's pulse raced, but she nodded, her hands trembling as she reached for the door. Rylan's presence had been a constant since she arrived, but now, as the storm raged outside, something else was coming, something darker, something she couldn't outrun. The wind howled louder as Rylan stepped into the hallway, disappearing into the darkness. Isla's eyes lingered on the door for a moment longer before she forced herself to turn away, her breath coming faster as the sounds of the storm grew more intense. Her heart hammered in her chest, the weight of everything crashing over her. She wasn't safe, not here, not anywhere. Derek's magic had already found her once, and it would find her again. It didn't matter how far she ran or how deeply she buried herself in Rylan's protection. Derek would not stop. He would not rest until she was his again, and Isla, the queen, wasn't ready. She had no idea how to wield the power Rylan spoke of. She had no idea how to be who she once was, but there was one thing she knew for sure. She couldn't go back. She couldn't let Derek win. Her fingers clenched around the silver sigil that now marked her wrist, the faint glow pulsing beneath her skin. The magic was already inside her, flowing through her veins. And though she had no idea how to control it, she was beginning to realize that it was the only thing that could save her. The door rattled behind her as she backed away, the silence stretching between her and the danger that lurked beyond the manor walls. She had to survive. She had to be ready, because Derek was coming. And this time, she wouldn't run. The first rays of dawn filtered through the dense trees of the forest, casting long shadows across the training grounds that had been set up just outside the manor. Isla stood at the edge of the clearing, her heart pounding in anticipation. The wind was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of earth and fresh rain, but it wasn't enough to mask the weight of what she was about to face. She had spent the last few days in a haze of confusion, trying to come to terms with the revelation that she was no longer just Isla, the woman who had survived an abusive marriage. She was the reincarnated queen of the wolf realm, the one who could break the ancient curse that bound the human and wolf kingdoms. But with that knowledge came the crushing weight of responsibility, a burden she wasn't sure she was ready for. Rylan had told her she was destined for greatness, that her powers were tied to the natural world, to the wolves themselves, and to the moon that hung in the sky like an eternal witness. But every time she tried to grasp that power, it felt just beyond her reach, like a dream she couldn't quite remember. Now, as she stood in the clearing, she could feel it, The power that was hers, waiting to be awakened. It was like a spark inside her, flickering with potential, but it needed the right moment, the right push to ignite it fully. "Focus, Isla," Ryland's voice called out from behind her, firm and steady. She turned, finding him standing at the edge of the training grounds, his amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. The wolves who had gathered around them, watching with silent expectation, mirrored his gaze. This was more than just a test of strength. This was about something deeper, her ability to lead them, to be the queen she had been born to be. Ryland approached, his steps quiet on the damp earth, and came to a stop beside her. His presence, as always, was overwhelming, a constant pull that threatened to drown her in its gravity. But this time, she welcomed it. "You must learn to control it," he said softly, his voice holding a note of urgency that made her pulse quicken. "The bond between you and the pack is growing. You feel it, don't you?" Isla nodded slowly, her gaze shifting to the wolves who were now gathered in a circle around them. Each one watched her with eyes that were both calculating and curious. Some of them were the same wolves she had seen when she first arrived, their faces hard and unreadable. Others were new, their presence filling the air with an unspoken tension. They didn't yet trust her, they had no reason to. "I can feel them," Isla admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to focus, to tune into the heartbeat of the pack, the rhythm that flowed just beneath the surface of the world. "But I can't control it." "You will," Ryland said, his tone certain. "The more you connect with them, the stronger your power will become. But first, you must learn to trust it." He held out his hand, his fingers brushing the air in front of her, almost like a conductor guiding an orchestra. "Feel the earth beneath you, the wolves around you. Let their energy flow into you." Isla closed her eyes again, breathing in deeply. At first, there was only the silence of the forest, the gentle rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds. But then, something shifted. A warmth spread through her chest, and she felt the heartbeat of the land beneath her feet, as if the very soil was alive and breathing with her. Her senses sharpened. She could hear the soft growls and growling breaths of the wolves around her, the flutter of their tails against the ground. She felt their power, their strength, and their loyalty to Ryland. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't the connection she needed. She focused harder, opening herself to the force of nature around her. She felt the pulse of the earth, the steady rhythm of the wind, the call of the moon above her. And then, it happened. A flicker of power surged through her, raw and untamed. It was like lightning, a jolt of energy that shot through her veins and spread outward into the pack. Her breath caught in her throat as the wolves shifted around her, their eyes glowing faintly with the power she had just awakened. She could feel the energy flowing between them, a bond that was now undeniable. Ryland watched her, his eyes never leaving her face. "Good," he murmured, a smile touching the corners of his lips. "Now you understand." Isla opened her eyes, a mixture of awe and disbelief swirling inside her. "I did it," she whispered to herself. "I actually did it." Ryland nodded, his gaze softening. "This is only the beginning, Isla. But you are not alone in this." He turned to the pack, who were now standing at attention. "They will help you, as will I. Together, we will break the curse." Isla looked at Ryland, her heart pounding in her chest. The bond between them was stronger than ever, and she could feel the weight of the responsibility settling onto her shoulders. She was the queen who could break the curse, but first she had to prove herself to the pack and to herself. The next few days were a blur of training and growth. Isla spent her time learning to harness the powers that were now a part of her, guided by Ryland and the wolves who served him. The connection between her and the pack deepened with every passing hour, and though some of the wolves were hesitant, others began to show signs of respect. Talon, a massive wolf with dark fur and piercing eyes, was one of the most skeptical of them all. He watched Isla with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity, his body tense whenever she was near. But with time, he began to warm to her, his initial distrust melting away as she demonstrated her growing power. "I'll never be as strong as you," Isla said one evening, her breath heavy from the exertion of their training. She had spent the last few hours running with the pack, pushing herself to keep up with their swift, fluid movements. It was the first time she had been able to match their speed, but it had come at a price. Her body ached, and the power within her was still untamed, fluctuating between overwhelming surges and deep emptiness. Rylan was at her side, his expression unreadable. "You don't need to be as strong as me, Isla. You need to be strong enough to lead them, to protect them." She looked up at him, her chest tight. His words were a constant echo in her mind, but the pressure of leadership was heavier than she had imagined. The weight of a crown, even one she hadn't asked for, was now a part of her. And with it, the responsibility of the pack, of both the wolves and the humans who lived in the realms. But just as Isla began to settle into a new role, a new threat emerged. It came in the form of a wolf named Kieran, a trusted ally of Rylan's who had served him for years. At first, Kieran was kind, supportive even, offering Isla guidance when she needed it most. But over time, there was a change in him, a darkness that Isla couldn't quite place. One evening, while the pack gathered around a fire, Isla overheard a conversation between Kieran and another wolf, one of the newer members of the pack. She wasn't meant to hear it, but the words stuck in her mind. "We'll have to get rid of her." Kieran's voice was low, filled with a venom that made Isla's blood run cold. "She'll ruin everything. The human queen. She's not our future." The words cut through her like a blade. What? Isla couldn't believe what she was hearing. Kieran had been one of the wolves who had respected her the most. Now, he was plotting against her. As the conversation ended and Kieran slipped away into the shadows, Isla's heart sank. She couldn't understand why someone who had once been loyal to Rylan would turn against her. But she knew one thing for certain. She could no longer trust everyone in the pack. Rylan, sensing her distress, appeared by her side. "You heard, didn't you?" Isla nodded, her eyes still locked on the spot where Kieran had vanished. "I don't know what to do," she confessed. "He's plotting against me." Rylan's expression hardened, a storm brewing in his amber eyes. "Then we will face this together." Isla's journey toward understanding her power had only just begun, but already new enemies were emerging from within her own ranks. She had to face her fears, her doubts, and the betrayal of someone she had trusted. But as she stood beside Rylan, knowing that the pack's loyalty was still wavering, she realized one undeniable truth. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the future of both realms, and nothing, no betrayal, no magic, could stop her from claiming her throne. The forest, once a haven, now felt oppressive. Its towering trees cast long, jagged shadows that seemed to creep closer as Isla walked through the thick underbrush. She could feel the weight of the pack's eyes on her as they followed her every move. Their loyalty was beginning to waver, and she knew it. Despite the progress she had made in connecting with them, the bond that was meant to unite the wolves and herself felt strained, fragile. A mortal woman, a human, was supposed to be their queen. They had whispered about her behind her back, uncertain of her ability to lead. Uncertain of what she could offer that Rylan couldn't. But the truth was, Isla wasn't even sure she could lead herself, let alone an entire kingdom of wolves. She paused in her walk, looking out over the dense forest. The moon hung high, casting an eerie light over the land. It was peaceful, but it felt wrong. A sense of unease lingered in the air, thick like fog. She couldn't shake the feeling that something, someone, was watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Isla," Rylan's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to find him standing a few feet away, his presence powerful and comforting, yet there was a shadow in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. The weight of his gaze made her heart beat faster, but she couldn't read the emotions swirling within him. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the darkened woods. "You feel it too, don't you?" The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. "What is it?" Ryland's gaze hardened. "Doubt." Isla frowned, confusion clouding her features. "Doubt?" "The wolves," he said, his voice low. "They're unsure. I can feel it. There are those who still do not believe in you. A mortal woman, leading them." He trailed off, his expression tense. The weight of his words hit Isla like a stone in her chest. She knew Ryland's loyalty was with her, but the pack, they weren't as certain, and without their loyalty, without their trust, everything she was working toward would crumble. The air between them grew thick with the unsaid. Ryland's struggle was clear. He had always been the alpha, the ruler of the pack, and now he was caught between his duty to his people and his commitment to her. His first allegiance had always been to the pack, to the wolves, but now it was to Isla. "You have to trust them," Isla said softly, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to Ryland or to herself. His gaze softened as he looked at her. "I do trust them. But what if they don't trust you? What if—" A scream shattered the silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of wolves growling in the distance. Isla's heart leapt into her throat. Without thinking, she grabbed Ryland's arm, her grip tight as panic surged through her. "What was that?" she gasped. "It's coming from the north gate," he said, already moving with the speed and grace of a wolf. "Stay here." But Isla wasn't about to stay behind. She couldn't. She had come too far to cower in the shadows now. She followed him, her footsteps quick as they moved toward the source of the chaos. By the time they reached the northern gate, the atmosphere had shifted. The once calm night was now thick with tension. A group of wolves was gathered around something, or rather, someone. Isla's heart skipped a beat when she saw the figure at the center of the circle. Kieran, the traitor. Isla's blood ran cold as she locked eyes with the ambitious wolf shifter, standing there with a wicked smirk on his face. He was surrounded by his followers, his supporters, wolves who had once pledged their loyalty to Ryland, to the pack, but now their allegiance was in question, and in the middle of it all Isla could see the unmistakable glint of a dagger in Kieran's hand, its blade coated in blood. "I knew it," Isla whispered under her breath. Ryland stepped forward, his voice thunderous as he confronted Kieran. "What have you done?" Kieran looked up at Ryland, his smile cold and calculating. "I've done what needed to be done, Ryland. The pack was never meant to be ruled by a mortal. She is weak. You've let her, make decisions for us." Isla felt the sting of his words, but they weren't just aimed at her. They were aimed at Ryland, too, at everything they had worked toward. "You've betrayed me," Ryland said, his voice low, dangerous. "You've betrayed the pack." "You were weak to trust her," Kieran spat, his tone venomous. "We should have never allowed her to lead, and now—" Before he could finish, Ryland lunged at Kieran, his fangs bared, his claws extended. The other wolves around them backed away, but Isla could feel the tension in the air as they watched. Some of them were waiting for a signal, for the fight to turn in their favor, for their side to win. Kieran was fast, but Ryland was faster. The two wolves collided in a flurry of motion, a whirlwind of fur, teeth, and claws. Isla could hear the sound of their struggle, the sickening snap of bone, the growls, the deep growls that reverberated through her chest. But as the battle raged on, Isla felt something in her stir, something that had been growing stronger in the past few days, the power she had awakened, the connection she had felt with the wolves. It was still raw, unrefined, but now it surged inside her like a fire, something she couldn't ignore. She closed her eyes, letting the power flow through her. She felt the earth beneath her feet, the pull of the moon above her head, and the strength of the pack. They were her people now. She was their queen, whether they liked it or not. And she would not allow Kieran's betrayal to tear them apart. With a cry, she extended her hand toward the wolves, reaching for the power that connected them all. She focused on Rylan, on the bond they shared, and she pulled. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and for a moment, everything stopped. The wind ceased, the battle paused. Isla opened her eyes, and for the first time, she felt the full force of her powers surge through her. The wolves around her were caught in it too, their eyes glowing with the same golden light that burned in her own. Rylan and Kieran froze in their struggle, their eyes locking on Isla. Kieran's expression twisted with disbelief as he realized what was happening. "This is impossible," he growled. "No," Isla said, her voice steady, her power now a part of her. "This is my kingdom, and no one, especially not you, will take it from me." With a wave of her hand, the magic in the air thickened, and Kieran was thrown back, crashing into the trees with a sickening thud. The pack watched in stunned silence as Isla stood, the power of the earth and the wolves coursing through her veins. Rylan stood beside her, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. His eyes softened as he looked at her. "You did it," he said, awe in his voice. "You're ready." Isla nodded, though the victory felt hollow. She had proven herself to the pack, but at what cost? Kieran lay on the ground, his eyes blazing with fury, but he didn't move. He knew he had been defeated, and as Isla stood tall, a queen in every sense of the word, she realized that the battle was only just beginning. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, thick and ominous, mirroring the tension that hung in the air. Isla stood at the balcony of the manor, gazing out over the pack's lands, her heart racing. The winds howled through the trees, carrying the scent of impending war. The tranquility of the forest, the very essence of her newfound life, felt fragile, on the edge of being shattered. Derek's forces were coming. She could feel them, feel the magic rippling from the east, as if the very earth beneath her feet trembled in fear. The betrayal of Kieran had been just the beginning. Derek, fueled by rage and greed, had unleashed the full weight of his dark magic. The curses he had placed on the Wolf Kingdom were starting to spread. The bond between Isla and Rylan, the very thing that had made them stronger, was now the key to Derek's twisted plan. He knew that Isla was the only one who could break the curse, and if he couldn't control her, he would destroy everything she had built. A chill ran down her spine, but she didn't flinch. She was no longer the broken woman who had stumbled into this world. She was the queen now. She was the one who would lead them. "Are you ready?" Rylan's voice was a low murmur behind her. Isla turned, her heart swelling at the sight of him. His presence had always been commanding, but now it felt like something else. A promise, a bond that tied them together stronger than any magic could. He was hers, and she was his. She nodded, her hand reaching out for his. "I have to be." Rylan's amber eyes studied her, his expression unreadable. "We will fight together. You know your role, Isla. You've awakened your powers. You've shown them you are our queen." He stepped closer, placing his hand over hers. "But you must lead them. Show them the strength you've always had inside." Isla's chest tightened at his words. She could feel the weight of the pack's loyalty on her shoulders. They had all seen her rise, seen her connect with the land, the wolves, the moon. But the war ahead would test her. It would test her ability to unite the wolves, her wolves, against a force they had never seen before. "I will lead them," she said, her voice firm. "For the pack, for us." Rylan nodded, his face softening. "Then we shall face this war as one." The battlefield was just beyond the eastern edge of the forest. It had been days since Isla had felt the tension of war in the air. But now the pack was gathered. Their numbers were strong. But the enemy that approached was nothing like they had ever fought before. Derek's forces were merciless, and Kieran had rallied the wolves who had once stood by Rylan, turning them into soldiers for a darker cause. Isla's heart pounded in her chest as she stood before the pack. They had assembled in the clearing near the front lines, a place where the ancient trees of the forest could offer little shelter against the coming storm. The ground beneath them was muddy and churned by the heavy rain that had begun to fall, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside her. "Isla," Ryland's voice came from beside her. He stood tall, his eyes scanning the horizon where Derek's dark forces were gathering. "We will need every bit of strength you have, but remember, your power, your bond with the wolves, it's more than just magic. It's your leadership. Trust them." Isla took a deep breath, stepping forward in front of the pack. She didn't need to say much. They had all seen her lead before, but now, in this moment, she needed to show them something else. She needed to show them that they could trust her to protect them. She raised her hand, silencing the murmurs that had been spreading among the wolves. Her gaze swept over the gathered pack, each wolf, both new and old members, looking at her with a mixture of reverence and doubt. The wolves that stood beside her had fought in battles, had defended their territory for centuries. Yet, here she was, a mortal woman with a crown she had never asked for, thrust into a role she had never wanted. But she was their queen, and they needed to believe it. They needed to understand that the war they were about to fight was more than just a battle for territory. It was a battle for the very survival of both realms. Isla's voice rang out, clear and steady. "We fight for more than just the pack. We fight for the future, for our people, our families, and for the chance to break the curse that has bound us for too long. Today, we end this." The wolves howled in unison, a chorus of power and unity that echoed through the forest. Isla felt the power surging within her, the connection to the wolves strengthening. She could feel the land beneath her feet, the power of the earth itself, and she knew this was her moment. The moment when she would prove that she was not just a queen by blood, but by her strength, her will, and her love for them. The battle began with a ferocity that Isla had not expected. Derek's forces were merciless, his dark magic flaring up in violent bursts that rattled the air around them. The wolves fought fiercely, their claws and teeth slashing through the darkness, but they were no match for the dark magic that Derek wielded. Isla could see it in their eyes, the fear, the hesitation, but then she felt it, the surge of power rising within her, the connection to the wolves growing stronger. Her heart pounded with each strike, each blow. She was their queen. She had to be. "Rylan," she called, her voice ringing through the battlefield. Rylan, his fur rippling with power, turned to her. "I'm here." With a wave of her hand, the earth trembled. The wolves around her followed suit, their strength growing as the bond between them deepened. She felt the pack's power surge through her, unified, unstoppable. She was more than just a mortal woman. She was their queen, their leader, and they would follow her. She raised her hand again, calling forth the energy of the earth, the wolves, and the moon. The power she had awakened grew in intensity, swirling around her like a storm. With a single, decisive motion, Isla summoned the power of the pack, channeling it into the earth beneath her feet. A massive shockwave rippled out from her, throwing Derek's forces back, disrupting his magic and causing his soldiers to falter. For the first time in the battle, the wolves felt the shift. They saw the strength of their queen, the power she had unleashed, and they surged forward with renewed vigor. But the battle wasn't over. Derek, his fury now directed at Isla, stepped forward, his dark magic swirling around him like a storm cloud. His eyes blazed with malice, and his voice boomed across the field. "You think you can defeat me? You think a mortal woman has the power to stop me?" Isla's heart beat in her chest like a drum, the force of her power vibrating through her bones. "I don't need to defeat you alone," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "I have my pack, and I will never stop fighting for them." With a final cry, she directed the full force of her power toward Derek. The energy that surged from her felt like a wave crashing against the shore, unstoppable and all-encompassing. Derek screamed as the magic enveloped him, his dark energy disintegrating beneath the force of her will. The battle raged on, but with the fall of Derek's forces, the tide had shifted. The wolves fought with renewed strength, their loyalty to Isla unshakable. Ryland stood by her side, his fierce protection fueling her as they fought together. The battle ended in a chaotic silence. The air was thick with the scent of blood and sweat, but the field was theirs. Derek had been defeated. The curse that had bound their realms for centuries was finally broken. But the cost was heavy. As Isla looked over the battlefield, her heart sank. The pack had won, but she had lost something precious. A piece of her mortal life had been torn away in the battle, and she could feel the weight of that loss in her bones. She collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving with exhaustion. Ryland was at her side in an instant, his hand on her shoulder, his gaze soft with concern. "You did it," he whispered, his voice full of awe and reverence. "You led them. You broke the curse." Isla nodded, her head spinning. The battle was over, but the cost had been great. She had lost a part of herself in the process, but she had gained something else in return. She had gained the pack's loyalty. She had gained the love of the Wolf Kingdom, and most importantly, she had gained the strength to be the queen they needed. Ryland pulled her into his arms, his warmth a comfort against the coldness of the world around them. "You are not alone," he whispered, his voice filled with devotion. "We are with you, always." And in that moment, Isla realized that the crown she wore wasn't just a symbol of power, it was a symbol of love, of sacrifice, and of the family she had found in the wolves. Together, they had broken the curse. Together, they would rule, and together, they would rebuild. The battlefield was still and silent now, the once thick air of war dissipating like smoke after a fire. The cries of battle had faded, and all that remained was the heavy scent of blood, the jagged remnants of what had been destroyed. It was in these moments, after the storm had passed, that Isla could hear the soft sobs of her people, the wolves, the humans, those who had fought and lost something in the process of this war. Isla stood on the precipice of the kingdom's future, looking out over the vast lands that stretched before her. The land itself seemed to breathe, as if the earth were recovering from the weight of the curse that had plagued it for centuries. Yet despite the soft beauty of the morning sun rising over the horizon, there was still a heaviness in the air. The cost of the victory, the cost of breaking the curse, had been more than just bloodshed. It had been lives lost, trust broken, and memories fractured. But Isla was determined. She had come into this world with nothing more than a shattered past, but now, standing as the queen of the Wolf Kingdom, the weight of her crown felt less like an ornament and more like an anchor. She wasn't just the woman Ryland loved. She was the ruler of these lands, a beacon of hope for the people who had once feared the power that resided within her. The wolves, her pack, had seen her lead them into battle, and they had followed her with fierce loyalty. But now came the harder task, leading them through the aftermath of war. There was healing to be done, and Isla knew that she couldn't do it alone. Isla, Ryland's voice, familiar and steady, cut through her thoughts. He appeared at her side, his gaze meeting hers with a softness that spoke volumes despite the exhaustion in his eyes. The lines on his face had deepened, but there was something about his presence that still carried the power of a king. She looked at him, her heart swelling in her chest. Despite the toll the war had taken on them both, their bond had only grown stronger. "What now?" she asked quietly, her voice hoarse from the strain of the past few days. "Where do we go from here?" Ryland's gaze swept over the kingdom they had fought so hard to protect, his eyes lingering on the wolves who had gathered around, rebuilding their homes and their lives. "We rebuild," he said simply. "Together. The war is over, but the true battle starts now. We must unite what was broken." Isla nodded, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She had always known that this wasn't just about defeating Derek or breaking the curse. It was about forging a new future, a future where the wolves and the humans could live in harmony. But the scars of war ran deep, and the wounds that had been inflicted on both sides could not be healed with just words or promises. The days that followed were filled with the quiet work of rebuilding. Isla found herself walking the lands, speaking with the wolves, listening to their grievances and their fears. Some were hesitant to fully embrace the peace she was offering. Others were angry at the cost of the war. She understood their pain, their loss. She too had lost so much, but she was determined to show them that the future was worth fighting for. She worked with Rylan at her side, organizing the rebuilding efforts, guiding the wolves to work together to restore what had been destroyed. There were tensions, of course. Not everyone was ready to accept her as their queen. There were whispers, doubts about a mortal woman ruling over them. But Isla could see the shift in the air, the way the wolves began to look at her, not as a stranger or an outsider, but as their leader. Laya, her daughter, had become Isla's greatest source of strength. In the quiet moments between rebuilding efforts, Isla would find solace in her child's laughter, in her innocent joy at the sight of the blooming flowers and the clear skies above. Laya was the future Isla had fought for, the light that guided her through the darkness of war. She was the reason Isla could keep moving forward, the reason she could believe that, despite the cost, there was still hope. But even in these tender moments, Isla couldn't escape the heaviness in her heart. Rylan had been by her side through everything, and his presence was a comfort, but she could see the burden he carried. He was the king of the wolves, the protector of his people. His loyalty to her was unwavering, but she could see the struggle in his eyes as they worked together to rebuild a fractured kingdom. His people were his first allegiance, and the tension between personal love and political duty weighed on him just as it weighed on her. One evening, as the sun set over the land, Isla found herself alone in the garden that had once been her sanctuary. It had been days since she had felt at peace, since she had truly allowed herself to reflect on everything that had happened. She had always known that ruling would be difficult, but nothing had prepared her for the weight of it. She had been thrust into this role, not by choice, but by fate, and every decision she made affected the lives of the wolves she had come to love. Rylan appeared behind her, his footsteps soft against the grass. He didn't speak at first, but his presence was enough to break the silence. "I can't do this alone," Isla admitted, her voice trembling slightly. She didn't turn to face him, but could feel the steady warmth of his gaze on her. "You don't have to," Rylan replied, his voice low, filled with quiet certainty. He stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Isla. You never have been." She felt the truth of his words settle in her chest. He had been with her every step of the way, and though she carried the weight of the crown, she didn't have to carry it alone. Together, they would rebuild not just the kingdom, but the very foundation of the future they would build for their daughter. As the weeks passed, Isla's leadership grew stronger. The pack began to unite under her rule, and the bonds between the wolves and the humans began to heal. There were challenges, of course. Old rivalries resurfaced, and some wolves still resisted her rule, but Isla was patient. She understood that trust was earned, not given, and she was determined to earn it. She spent countless hours working with Rylan, finding ways to bridge the divide between the two realms. It was slow work, but every step forward was a victory. Every time a wolf pledged their loyalty to her, every time a human trusted her to lead them, she felt the weight of her crown grow lighter. The war had taken so much from her, from all of them, but now, in the quiet moments of rebuilding, Isla could see the hope that flickered in the eyes of those who followed her. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about love, loyalty, and the legacy they would leave behind. One evening, as Isla sat in the garden with Laya, watching the last remnants of the sunset fade into the horizon, Rylan joined them. He knelt beside her, his hand resting on her knee. For a long moment, they simply sat together, the silence between them comfortable, filled with the peace that had eluded them for so long. "You've done well," Rylan said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "The wolves, they see you now. They see you as their queen." Isla smiled, though the weight of her responsibility still lingered. "We've all done well," she replied softly. "But I couldn't have done it without you." Ryland's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You don't have to thank me. I've always believed in you." And in that moment, Isla realized something that had been growing inside her since the battle. She was not just the queen of the wolves. She was their protector, their mother, their guide. And with Ryland by her side, they would build a kingdom that would last for generations to come. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky above, Isla felt the weight of her crown, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt right. She was ready. Is not just leading a kingdom, but building a legacy for her daughter and her people. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting its first golden rays over the land. The once dreaded darkness that had covered the kingdom now seemed to have receded, leaving behind the promise of a brighter future. Yet, even as the light pierced through the forest, a deep, gnawing feeling settled in Isla's chest. It was the kind of unease that came not from the land, but from the shifting winds of the world around her. Isla stood on the balcony of the manor, her gaze sweeping over the lands that were once divided but were now uniting under her rule. The pack, her wolves, had come to accept her as their queen. But despite the peace she had worked so hard to achieve, the horizon was still dotted with storm clouds, both literal and metaphorical. She could feel it in the air, a subtle shift, like a tide turning against her. She had known, deep down, that peace was never truly guaranteed, and now the price of that peace was becoming painfully clear. "Isla," Ryland's voice broke through her thoughts, steady and calm, as always. "We've received word of a disturbance at the borders." She turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat at the sight of him standing there, his presence still as commanding and soothing as it had been since the first time they met. But there was something different in his eyes today, a weariness, a flicker of uncertainty that made her stomach tighten. "What's happened?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rising dread in her chest. Ryland's brow furrowed as he stepped closer, the tension in his posture evident. "A rogue faction of wolves," he said quietly, "led by a former ally of Derek." Isla's breath caught in her throat. A former ally of Derek. She had thought they were done with him, with his followers. She had fought to break the curse, to rebuild the pack, to give her people a future, and now, it seemed, that future was under threat once again. "Are they planning an assault?" she asked, her voice tightening with the weight of the news. Ryland's eyes darkened. "They're already gathering. They've been rallying the wolves who still harbor resentment against you. They believe the pack should be ruled by force, not by someone like you, a mortal woman." Isla clenched her fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms, the doubt that had plagued her since the beginning, the whispers of those who had questioned her right to rule, had now turned into something far more dangerous. She had fought for the pack's loyalty, for their trust, but this new threat was an assault on everything she had worked for. "Then we'll fight," Isla said, her voice firm despite the turmoil inside her. "I won't let them undo everything we've built." Ryland stepped forward, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I know you won't, but this will not be an easy fight." Isla met his gaze, her resolve hardening. "I'm not afraid of them." Ryland studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. "I know. But there's something you need to understand, Isla. This faction is unlike any enemy we've faced before. They have the power to shake the very foundation of the pack." Isla's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "They are not just wolves," Ryland said, his voice low, filled with a quiet intensity. "They are wolves who have embraced the darker magic, the magic Derek used. They are bound to forces that are far stronger than anything we've faced. This is not just a battle for the kingdom. It's a battle for our very souls." A chill ran through Isla, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't. The weight of her crown, the weight of her responsibility, pressed down on her like 1,000 stones. She was the queen now, and this was her test. "I will face them," Isla said, her voice unwavering. "And I will protect this pack. I will protect my people, no matter what it takes." The rogue faction's assault came sooner than expected. Within days, the wolves had launched an attack, their movements swift and calculated, as if they had been planning this for months. Isla felt the fury of their assault echoing through the kingdom like a thunderclap. The wolves she had once fought beside had now turned their claws against her, their eyes filled with hatred and resentment. As the battle raged, Isla's powers surged within her, calling forth the magic of the earth, the moon, and the wolves. She was no longer the frightened woman who had stumbled into the wolf kingdom. She was their queen, and she would not let them fall. With Rylan by her side, they led the charge, their wolves following closely behind, their loyalty unwavering. But even as they fought, Isla could feel the darkness closing in. The rogue wolves, led by the vengeful Kieran, were relentless. They fought with an intensity born of rage and fear, determined to undo everything Isla had fought for. "You're nothing but a puppet," Kieran's voice rang out, his eyes glowing with a twisted fervor. "You are a mortal, Isla. You will never be our queen." Isla's heart raced as she faced him, her claws bared, her magic crackling in the air around her. "I am your queen," she said, her voice carrying the weight of her newfound strength. "And you will kneel before me." With a fierce roar, Kieran lunged at her, his claws slashing through the air, but Isla was faster. She met him head-on, their powers colliding in a burst of energy that shook the very earth beneath them. The battle between them was more than just physical. It was a war of wills, a contest of strength and destiny. And in that moment, Isla knew one thing for certain: she was not going to back down. The fight raged on, the pack rallying around her, their loyalty solidifying with every strike. But as the battle wore on, Isla felt a growing sense of unease. She could feel Kieran's magic, his dark forces pulling at the very fabric of the pack. He was more than just a traitor. He was a vessel for the darkness Derek had unleashed upon the realm. And if she didn't stop him, everything they had fought for would be lost. With one final desperate cry, Isla called upon the full force of her magic. The wolves around her howled in unison, their power joining with hers in a wave of energy that surged through the battlefield. The ground trembled, and the sky seemed to crack open with the intensity of their power. Kieran was thrown back, his body slamming against the earth as the force of Isla's magic overwhelmed him. For a moment, everything was still. The battle had ceased. The rogue faction had been defeated. But as Isla stood over Kieran's fallen body, her heart heavy with the weight of what had just transpired, she knew that the battle for her throne was way from over. The war had only just begun. As the dust settled and the last remnants of the rogue wolves were driven away, Isla stood on the edge of the battlefield, her heart heavy with the aftermath of the fight. She had won, yes, but at what cost? The kingdom had been shaken. The trust she had worked so hard to rebuild had been fractured again. The rogue faction's assault had tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had proven herself in battle, but she knew that the true test was yet to come. Rylan stood beside her, his presence a quiet reassurance in the midst of the chaos. He didn't speak at first, but his hand rested on her shoulder, grounding her as she looked out over the battlefield. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with pride. "You've shown them all. You are the queen they need." Isla's gaze softened as she looked up at him. The love and loyalty she saw in his eyes filled her with a sense of peace, but the weight of her responsibility remained. The war was over, for now, but the challenges she faced were far from finished. "We've won," she said quietly, "but I know there will be more battles to come. The kingdom is still fragile." Rylan nodded, his expression unwavering. "We will face them together, always." Isla took a deep breath, her hand tightening around the hilt of her sword. She had proven herself on the battlefield, but there was still more work to be done. More enemies to defeat, more challenges to face. And as she looked at Rylan, she knew that no matter what came next, she was ready. The winds howled through the forest, carrying with them the heavy scent of rain and blood. The sky above was a deep, bruised purple, the last remnants of daylight struggling against the encroaching darkness. Isla stood at the edge of the battlefield, her hands clenched tightly around the hilt of her sword, the weight of the blade grounding her as much as the earth beneath her feet. The rogue faction, led by Kieran, had gathered once again, this time in full force. Their final assault was upon them, and Isla could feel the weight of the impending confrontation pressing down on her chest. This was the moment that would define everything, the culmination of her journey from a broken woman running from her past to the queen she was now. She had fought for the pack. She had fought for peace. But as the enemy gathered before her, Isla knew that the price of that peace was about to become far steeper than she had ever imagined. Rylan stood beside her, his presence unwavering. The connection between them had only deepened since their first meeting. His loyalty to her was absolute, and it was this bond, this strength, that had carried them through countless battles. Yet, as they faced the threat before them, Isla knew that this battle would be the ultimate test of not only their love, but the future of the kingdom they had fought so hard to protect. "You're ready," Rylan said, his voice a calm reassurance in the midst of the storm. His eyes, bright with that fierce golden light, met hers. "You've proven yourself more times than I can count. Now is the time to claim your crown, once and for all." Isla met his gaze, her heart steady despite the fear and uncertainty swirling within her. She had come so far, and now, with the fate of both the human and wolf realms on her shoulders, she could not afford to falter. She nodded, her voice low but determined. "I will protect us. I will protect the pack." With a final glance at Rylan, Isla stepped forward, her feet sure against the soft earth, the magic within her thrumming to life. The wolves gathered behind her, their eyes focused on her as their queen. She felt their faith in her, their loyalty, and the deep bond that tied them all together. It was more than just magic now. It was love, sacrifice, and strength, qualities that she had never realized she possessed until this moment. The rogue wolves, led by Kieran, stood at the ready. Their eyes glinted with malice, the dark magic that Derek had once harnessed, now seeping into their bones. Kieran's face was twisted with resentment as he stepped forward, his voice cold and taunting. "You think you can lead us?" he spat. "A mortal woman? A human who thinks she can wield the power of the pack? You've lost, Isla. The kingdom was never meant for you." Isla's heart thundered in her chest, but she didn't flinch. This was it, the final confrontation. She could feel the strength of her power coursing through her veins, the earth beneath her feet humming with her command. This wasn't just a battle for the throne. It was a battle for everything she had fought for the wolves, for Rylan, for the future of both realms. "I am the queen," Isla said, her voice unwavering, "and you will bow before me." With a roar, Kieran lunged toward her, his claws slashing through the air, but Isla was ready. She met him head-on, her sword clashing against his claws with a resounding strike. The force of their collision shook the ground beneath them, but Isla didn't back down. Her magic surged, and the earth itself seemed to rise with her power. She could feel the wolves around her, their loyalty, their strength, all flowing into her as she fought. The battle that followed was fierce, a clash of magic and steel. Wolves and rogue factions alike collided with ferocity, but it was clear to Isla that this battle was not just about strength. It was about leadership, about showing the pack that she was the queen they needed. And as she fought, she realized something deep within herself. She was no longer the woman who had been running. She was no longer broken. She was whole. Kieran snarled as he attempted to strike again, but Isla was faster. She summoned the power of the moon, the earth, and the wolves that stood by her side. The magic around her crackled, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. With a single movement, she broke through Kieran's defenses, knocking him to the ground. The power that surged from her was overwhelming, and she watched as Kieran writhed beneath its force, his magic crumbling under the weight of hers. "You are defeated," Isla said, her voice steady and commanding. "This is the end, Kieran. The pack will never follow you." Kieran's eyes flickered with a mix of fury and fear as he gasped for breath. But Isla knew the battle wasn't over yet. She could still feel the dark forces lingering in the shadows, ready to pounce. And as she turned to face the rest of the rogue faction, she saw the hesitation in their eyes. They were no longer sure of their cause. They were no longer certain that Derek's dark magic was the path to victory. But the moment of weakness was fleeting. With a final, desperate roar, Kieran called upon the last of Derek's magic, his claws slashing through the air with dark intent. The magic exploded outward, a storm of energy that tore through the ground, throwing Isla and Raylan backward. The earth itself seemed to crack and shudder beneath the force of the magic. Isla struggled to her feet, her body bruised and battered, but her resolve unbroken. She could feel the weight of the world pressing on her, but she couldn't stop now. She couldn't let Derek's curse take hold again. "Raylan!" she shouted, her voice strained but filled with the power of the wolves. "We end this now!" Raylan's eyes blazed with a fierce determination as he joined her, his claws bared and ready. Together, they faced Kieran and the rogue wolves one final time. The battle was far from over, but Isla could feel the strength of the pack around her, the loyalty that had grown over time. They had all fought for this. They had all sacrificed for this. With a final cry, Isla summoned all of her power, focusing it on Kieran. The magic exploded outward, a wave of energy that consumed everything in its path. The rogue faction, their magic shattered, fell to the ground, defeated. Kieran screamed as the last of his power was ripped from him, and with that, the battle came to an end. Isla stood, breathing heavily, her sword still raised in the air. The battlefield around her was silent, the cries of battle fading into the distance. Her body ached from the fight, but the victory was sweet. The rogue faction had been defeated. Derek's curse had been broken, and the pack had been saved. As the dust settled and the last remnants of the rogue wolves were driven away, Isla stood on the edge of the battlefield, her heart heavy with the weight of the sacrifice that had been made. The cost of victory had been great, but the kingdom was hers. The pack was hers. And she had proven that she was not just a queen by title, but a queen by strength, by love, and by sacrifice. Raylan stood beside her, his gaze soft as he watched her. He had been with her through every battle, every trial, and now, as the sun began to set on the battlefield, they stood together, ready to face whatever the future held. "I couldn't have done this without you," Isla said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Raylan smiled, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You didn't have to. You were always meant to lead." Isla's heart swelled with a mixture of love and pride. She had started this journey as a broken woman, unsure of who she was or where she was going. But now, she was standing here, strong, confident, and the queen of the Wolf Kingdom. She had reclaimed her throne, but more importantly, she had changed the fate of the pack and of both realms. As they stood together, side by side, watching the last remnants of darkness fade into the night, Isla knew that this was not the end. It was just the beginning. The future was uncertain, but with Raylan by her side and the pack behind her, there was nothing they couldn't face. Together, they had overcome the darkness, and now, together, they would rebuild.